For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise my standing remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, after good results and success in recent years of defending and enforcing on our border, the Biden administration has turned on the green light being seen all the way to Central America to immigrating here illegally, giving us the Biden border crisis. It's not a matter of asylum, as asylum can be sought in Mexico. Continuing the trek to the U.S. border shows it's really about employment and economics. Meanwhile, as our citizens struggle with unemployment and the shutdowns by COVID, the Biden border crisis has subjected border states like mine in California to COVID outbreak risks from bypassing our laws. This begs the question, whose side is the Biden administration on? America's unemployed and COVID high-risk vulnerable, or foreign interests for politics? Indeed, it doesn't seem like they're on the side of Americans, and we are given, after less than 2 months, the Biden border crisis. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I rise today to follow up on the remarks of my friend from California who just noted the crisis we have at the border and the danger that that puts the American people in, and not just the American people, but the immigrants who seek to come here. Now, I rise today in particular to bring the public's attention to that border crisis, which my friend rightfully recognized is being driven by that guy who runs that outfit over there. Now, I do not mean in saying that the Secretary of Defense. You know, Lloyd Austin. I know who he is. I mean that other guy who runs that outfit over there down Pennsylvania Avenue, and that's the President of the United States. Now, I say this because the President cannot possibly have any idea what's going on, because no American president entrusted with the safety and well-being of the United States and her citizens would purposefully empower cartels, would purposely empower illegal organizations to harm American citizens for profit, to flood our streets with dangerous fentanyl and narcotics, to cause high-speed chases like the ones that have occurred in the district I represent, where Americans get endangered, the murder of Americans through wide-open borders. No American president would purposely do that, would they? No American president would purposely lie to immigrants and cause them to get raped and abused on long, dangerous journeys across the desert upon the promise of amnesty for crass political purposes. No American president would possibly do that, would he or she? No American president could be so callous, so indifferent to the lives of Americans and the immigrants who seek to come here, that he would allow his staff and the Secretary of Homeland Security to lie repeatedly to the American people that there is no crisis at our border. No American president would do that, so no American president could know that this is happening and take that position, could understand what is happening and then ignore it, could understand what is happening at the border and then deny it and encourage it through reckless policies. No, that guy who runs that outfit over there cannot possibly know what is happening at our border, because no American president would do that. But I assure you, we Texans know. Our neighbors in other border states know. And the American people across the country affected by this crisis know. We see it every day. The brutal conditions along a border ravaged by the deceit, the lies of politicians governing by soundbite and pretending they are compassionate. We do see it every day. Who is this that I am showing here on the floor of the United States House of Representatives? This is the Vargas family. I've come to know Lori, I've come to know other members of this family because Jared, depicted in this picture, was murdered by a colleague at a restaurant who was in this country illegally, who had been caught, let go, caught, let go, caught again, let go, and then murdered Jared. He's from San Antonio, Texas, which I represent. This is real. This happens every day. And we in Texas are on the front lines while the people in this body fiddle and endanger the lives of American citizens to prostrate themselves to a crass political left who could care less about the American citizens getting killed or raped. And they do it for political purposes. It's the arrogance of leftist Democrats destroying our own nation with trillions of dollars of spending. Reckless disregard of our energy independence and strength, reckless disregard of the small businesses getting destroyed by shutdowns, the livelihoods destroyed while peddling fear and panic. The reckless disregard of our children as their futures are destroyed by teachers' unions and the devastating masking of their innocent faces. The reckless disregard of our fundamental unalienable rights to worship, to speak freely, to defend ourselves with firearms, to pursue happiness by working to provide for our families. The reckless disregard for our safety while defunding police and attacking our rights to defend ourselves under the Second Amendment at the same time. Done on this floor today. The reckless disregard for our national security while empowering China to undermine our way of life. The reckless disregard for public health as we enjoin the very World Health Organization that lied to us to protect China. But perhaps the most reckless by my leftist Democratic colleagues is the arrogance of using crass political selfishness to encourage parents to send their children to be raped, abused, to ride on train cars, and even die along dangerous journeys, while simultaneously facilitating or encouraging the destruction of our neighbors to the south, in Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. It's happening in real time, and it is an extraordinary arrogance for purposes of crass political gain or perceived gain. Our neighbors in the south lament the mass exodus of their people under the lies and the false compassion being sold from American Democrats. This is the truth of what we're dealing with. Let's talk about some of the real issues going on our border. Uvalde, Texas. The mayor, Don McLaughlin, has said the 2019 border crisis will look like a cakewalk to what is coming with Biden's border crisis. He said they are seeing 10 to 12 high-speed chases each week with speeds up to 105 miles an hour. The local government has to take it on the chin because this administration refuses to secure the border. That is a mayor in Uvalde, Texas, just outside of the district I represent. My friend, Mr. Gonzalez, represents that district. Don calls me all the time saying, where's the help? Where is the federal government whose job it is to secure the border of the United States? You know where it is? Nowhere to be found. And in fact, actually found at a border, making it worse for the citizens of this country, making it more dangerous, purposefully or incompetently, either one unacceptably, endangering the lives of Americans and the immigrants who seek to come here. Del Rio Mayor Bruno Lozano, I'm pleading and requesting you to please put a halt to any measures regarding the release of immigrants awaiting court dates into the city of Del Rio and surrounding areas. Madam Speaker, the American people are pleading with their leadership. They are begging for the people in this body, the people's house, to recognize what is happening to them. It's real. People bury their head in the sand up here, protected by fences with razor wire, walking through magnetometers, tweeting out how they somehow compare or have compassion for immigrants. Look at us. And this, in this photo, is what is happening to immigrants in South Texas. There are mass graves where cartels kill people along the Rio Grande. There are people dying in the desert, seeking to come here like any normal person would do around the world, seeking to come to the United States of America, but being fed irrational hope from an administration for political purposes, endangering lives of immigrants and American citizens. Yuma, Arizona, Mayor Douglas Nichols. I am urging the federal level for additional resources for United States Customs and Border, the need for more space at migrant holding facilities that will allow for adherence to CDC guidelines, more COVID testing. There is no capacity in our current nonprofit system in Yuma. Our colleague, my friend from Texas, Mr. Cuellar, has said thousands of migrants have not been tested. Over 10,000 people have come in through the lower Rio Grande Valley. Quote, those folks aren't being tested. There are folks, my friends on the other side of the aisle, who recognize what's happening. My colleague, Mr. Gonzalez, sent a letter to Biden requesting a meeting stating, quote, it is imperative we get this situation under control or we are looking at another crisis on our hands. Well, that crisis is here. Citing the large number of unaccompanied children and increased hospital admissions. This is happening right now. Where is the president? Where is the Homeland Security Secretary? Where is anyone in this administration recognizing the crisis at our border, the death toll, the impact on citizens and immigrants who seek to come here? Texas State Senator Chuy Hinojosa, a Democrat, quote, I don't think, quite frankly, the Biden administration was aware of what's happening on the ground here. Which you can understand because they're just coming in and trying to get people up to speed with what's happening. But I don't think they were aware there were that many coming across. The Border Patrol is overwhelmed. They're throwing their hands up because they don't know what to do. That's all my Democrat friend from Texas. CBP has already encountered nearly 400,000 illegal immigrants since October, and the numbers are rising. For context, in the first 5 months of fiscal 2020, CBP encountered 200,000. That's twice as many this year. Twice as many. What changed? The administration's absurd, embarrassing, incompetent, or worse yet, purposefully malicious policies. Just last month, February, CBP encountered over 100,000 aliens at the border. 1 month. That's who they encountered. That's not gotaways. Guys, y'all, this is real. Come do like I've done and go spend the night on the border. Go sit down at the river at the Rio Grande. Talk to the immigrants. In my case, in broken Spanish, if you're fluent, talk to them or have somebody who can, and talk to them about why they're coming. Talk to them about what the cartels are doing to them. Have a conversation with a young man like I did last year about the pack of girls behind him, about whether they were abused on the journey, and he said, see. Or just continue to bury one's head in the sand and pretend it is compassionate to have open borders. Because that's what's happening today in the people's house. These are human beings, y'all. Leave that down. As of last month, the number of families encountered is the highest since January 2019. In January, 7,200, almost 7,300 family units were encountered. In February, that number skyrocketed to 19,246. That's not an accident. These are families. Encounters with What we call UACs, unaccompanied alien children, increased 74% year to date. Just last month, some 6,000 migrants aged 16 and 17 were caught. The Department of Homeland Security currently projects there will be 117,000 unaccompanied child migrants crossing the border this year. The number of migrant children is on pace to exceed the all-time record by 45%, and the administration does not have enough beds. The Biden administration needs another 20,000 beds to shelter the minors. Now, I have a couple of friends here, a couple of colleagues who I think are waiting to join. As a gentleman from California looking to add a few remarks, my friend from California, I will yield to you in just 1 minute, and then my friend from Virginia after him. But what I would say, when we're talking about these numbers, people get lost in the numbers. 20,000 beds, talking about 45% increases. Let's just be very clear. For those of us who spend time on the border, I'm going back on Monday. These are human beings. These are people. They are not political pawns. And that goes for American citizens, and it goes for the immigrants who seek to come here. And this is the dirty little secret. My Democrat colleagues know full well that what's happening at the border, it's going to be a catch and release organization. The Department of Homeland Security is turning CBP into a catch and release organization. So you'll see some of these numbers going down, but don't kid yourself, the American people watching this. When the numbers go down in these facilities, it is because the Biden administration is purposefully catching and releasing folks, whether they've been tested or not, regardless of what kind of security threat they might pose, regardless of fully checking whether a child goes with a family member or not, whether they can be abused, put into the sex trafficking trade, because it is rote incompetence. And when you see those numbers go down, just know what's happening. 11,000 people were caught and released in January and February, immediately caught and released from CBP rather than being put in facilities. I'd love to yield to the gentleman from California.
Colleague from Texas, Mr. Roy. Indeed, as another representative of a border state, we feel the effect as well of the Biden border crisis. President Trump saw the importance, as did many law and order Americans, of having a secure border. The Biden administration has stopped construction of the security fence hours after inaugurated. This has given us now the Biden border crisis. Reeling back enforcement of immigration. That seems to be their priority. Risking health of Americans with virus super spreaders is a result. As my colleague mentioned, the catch and release program is in full force. Do we really expect people to be released in this country to come back to have a hearing within 2 years? Past pattern shows not. The Biden administration has just canceled an agreement with Mexico to keep the asylum seekers on that side of the border, which worked pretty well to keep the numbers down from those coming through Mexico from Central America. Now the incentivization of that is another big green light. Look at the numbers we're talking about here. Just in January, the numbers increased to 78,000 and change. February, 100,000 so-called encounters at the border for people that our personnel have to deal with or might be sneaking through without dealing with our personnel. To add final insult to this policy to Americans, to taxpayers, in the so-called COVID relief bill, checks can go to illegal immigrants that are coming here via this manner. I mean, whose side is this administration on? The hardworking Americans coming through a COVID crisis, high unemployment? Who are they working for? I don't think it's us. I don't think it's the American people. As a Californian, I also want to hearken back to two tragedies amongst many. In Northern California, just a few short years ago, we lost a beautiful young lady named Kate Steinle in San Francisco, killed by an illegal immigrant who shouldn't have been here, who should have been deported at least 5 times over. Jamil Shah from the Los Angeles area, whose father I've met. His dad lost his son to a killing by an illegal immigrant. Whose side is this administration on when they carry out this policy just to either show they're different from Trump or that it's a political gain for them in their twisted view? I yield back to my colleague. Thank you for the time.
I thank the gentleman. He rightfully points out the impact on Ms. Steinle and her family and American citizens in California being negatively impacted by illegal immigration. I talked before about Jared Vargas in San Antonio, the city I represent, who was murdered a couple of years ago. His twin brother just graduated from college. He's going on. His family's a beautiful family. They've got a strong faith and they're persevering. But their family was turned upside down by a brutal murder. He was beaten to death and burned. Beaten to death and burned by a guy who came here illegally, was caught, let go, caught, let go, caught again, let go, beat and burned to death Jared Vargas. These are real people. We could do hundreds of these. We could talk to the angel families who've lost loved ones. We could talk to the parents of law enforcement officers and others in Border Patrol who have lost loved ones along our border. We could do a whole hour. We could do a whole day just going through that impact. And as I pointed out before in another slide, the impact on the immigrants who seek to come here. This is the story. All in the false name of compassion by this administration. I'll be happy to yield in just 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia. But my friend from California was raising the important points of the impact of illegal immigration, and now we're seeing it in real time, particularly in Texas, but among all 4 states along the border, throughout this country, empowering cartels, endangering the lives of the immigrants who seek to come here, endangering American citizens for one reason and one reason only, and that is the crass political interests of the American Democratic Party and this administration. I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from, 4 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, whatever time he needs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to the esteemed congressman from Texas who's been quite a champion on this issue. No nation in the history of the world has been more welcoming to immigrants than the United States. And no nation in the history of the world is more diverse or has provided more opportunity for people of all races and ethnic backgrounds. That's why millions of immigrants of all races and ethnicities are seeking to come to America. In fact, billions of the world's 7 billion non-U.S. population would come here undoubtedly if they could. I sincerely believe that most Americans, if not most elected officials, understand that the lack of an effective immigration policy is one of the most important threats to our country. However, President Biden's decision to reverse the Trump policies that successfully secured our border is dangerous to the future of our nation and driven solely by a need to pander to the left. Make no mistake, President Biden's policies created this very crisis today. His promise of amnesty made it worse, and his administration is now ignoring it. You'd think in the absence of this leadership, Congress would try to step in and address the Biden border surge crisis. Instead, we're expecting to take up 2 liberal amnesty bills in the House this week, coming week, including H.R. 6, the American Dream and Promise Act. H.R. 6 would provide amnesty to roughly 3 million people, which would be a slap in the face to everyone who ever has or currently is navigating our legal immigration system. Even worse, it would incentivize more illegal immigration at a time when we have no operational control of our southern border. Even more bizarre, this bill allows for criminal aliens, people who've committed crimes in American communities, to be eligible for amnesty. The bill specifically allows for an individual who's committed up to 2 misdemeanors or 1 crime of moral turpitude to gain a pathway to legal status. Some may say, well, misdemeanors aren't that serious. Well, here's a few examples of crimes that are only misdemeanors in states such as California: domestic violence, prostitution, drunk driving. Worst of all, this legislation provides a waiver for people who would technically not otherwise qualify for this amnesty. The waiver specifically covers human smuggling offenses, voter fraud offenses, and communicable diseases. I urge this Congress not to worsen the crisis and to instead debate legislation that makes Americans safer and honors our legal immigrants. Instead of providing amnesty to criminals, we should debate my legislation, H.R. 398, the No Asylum for Criminals Act, which would prohibit dangerous criminals from qualifying for asylum in the U.S. When it comes to legal immigration, people of good faith can debate on what the overall immigration levels are prudent for our country, how to best balance the needs of American citizens with the desire of immigrants who are simply seeking a better life for themselves and their family, how to cultivate patriotic assimilation, how to project jobs for American workers while providing labor for our businesses, and the merits or lack thereof of issues such as chain migration, birthright citizenship, diversity visas, and other unique features of America's immigration system. But there should be no debate on the rule of law. We should be united and bipartisan on the critical importance of enforcing our laws and eliminating illegal immigration. There's simply no honest debate regarding the fact that barriers, whether they're walls or fences, work. Just look around D.C. to see confirmation that our House Democrat leadership believes this. There should be no debate regarding the fact that illegal immigration is a significant threat to our national security, our economic security, and our health security. Illegal immigration further burdens our economy, our social services, our healthcare system, and our education system. Illegal immigration also enriches Mexico's organized crime and the cartels that control everyone and everything that comes across the southern border. The individuals illegally coming across our southern border suffer dangerous and sometimes deadly hardships and are often victimized by the Mexican cartel. Individuals who cannot afford to pay the smugglers are often extorted into carrying drugs and other illicit material into the U.S. Others are abused as indentured servants to the cartels if they make it across. Many must live the rest of their lives with existential threat to themselves and their families. Moreover, illegal immigration places our law enforcement and our citizens living near the border in immediate danger when drugs and other preventable material are smuggled across the border with impunity. We are risking turning every community into a border town and making our nation a sanctuary nation. We must commit to completing the wall, enforcing our existing laws, ending catch and release, requiring mandatory E-Verify, fixing our biometric entry-exit systems, and taking amnesty, unlawful employment, and citizenship off the table. The future of our country is clearly at stake with how we manage or don't manage immigration. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman from Virginia. In a moment, I will yield to the gentlelady from Georgia, and I would just thank the gentleman from Virginia for those remarks that are directly on point. And what we're seeing right now, you use the phrase that we're creating a sanctuary nation, sanctuary country. Well, that's what's happening. That's what this administration is doing. We don't need to talk about sanctuary cities anymore. This administration is just going right past sanctuary cities, and they want to make the United States of America a sanctuary nation. And they're turning the Department of Homeland Security and CBP into the welcoming center for a sanctuary nation. And not a welcoming center in the sense that we would all agree we want to do as Americans, to make sure that those who are truly seeking refuge, following our laws, seeking asylum, the things that our laws provide for, people truly under persecution. No. They're using that as an excuse and cover for wide open borders and essentially people seeking economic opportunity, which no one I know begrudges those who seek economic opportunity, but we do take issue with those who seek to violate our laws to come here, overwhelm our border, and an administration whose job it is to enforce the laws of the United States to refuse to do so. It begs the question whether the President of the United States, as I said before, either has no idea what's happening at the border or whether it is purposeful. And if it is purposeful, is it the President of the United States choosing to refuse to defend the Constitution and the laws and to refuse to take care to see that the laws of the United States are faithfully executed as is required under the Constitution of the United States? I think it is a question this body ought to be asking. The People's House ought to be asking, is the President of the United States refusing to take care to ensure that the laws of the United States with respect to our borders are being faithfully executed? I would posit that that is precisely what is happening, or the President of the United States has no idea what's happening at our border. Because again, no American president could be so callous as to use raw, crass politics to allow what's happening at our border to happen to human beings, American citizens and immigrants alike. That guy who runs that outfit over there. I would yield to the gentlelady from Georgia.
Thank you so much to the good gentleman from Texas. And I have to tell you, Jared, that you spoke about, I met his aunt and uncle a few years ago, and he suffered a death that is too much to think about. And suffering it, him being an American citizen, born here free, and being murdered like he was by illegal aliens, criminals, animals, is just too much to bear. This is the People's House. This is the House of Representatives that I've started to call the House of Hypocrites. This entire campus right now is surrounded by a border wall with razor wire. It's a fence, unlike anything at our southern border. This place is surrounded by the military. It is completely guarded, but we don't extend the same thing to the American people. Joe Biden administration, my Democrat colleagues here in Congress, Democrats in the Senate, they want the border ripped wide open, and that's what it is right now. I just watched a video that was shared this morning from Southeast Texas, where there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of people lined up to cross the Rio Grande, and they are being smuggled into our country by human traffickers. You see, it's big business to come into our country illegally. And Joe Biden is rewarding the smugglers, the coyotes, the cartels in Mexico and these other countries by opening our borders up and welcoming them all in, while they're forcing our kids to stay home and paying off these teacher union bosses. They have wide open 100% capacity in-person teaching for illegal children. What kind of country is this that rewards people that break into our country illegally, but yet abuses its citizens and taxpayers? There needs to be a change. And this is Joe Biden's crisis that he will never recover from. People are not stupid, no matter if they vote one party or the other. But the American people are going to be sick and tired of being run over and treated this way. Everybody wants to cry about COVID-19, the most politicized virus, a political tool that shut down America. Well, let me tell you something. All these people that I just watched on this video, they're not wearing masks like we're required to do. They're bringing all kinds of diseases into our country, but yet they're being welcomed in. Here, come to school. Here's a bus ride to another city. Come on in. Yet America is still not fully open because of COVID-19. There's so many reasons that we can call this the House of Hypocrites that we could be here all day long, but I appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Well, I appreciate the gentlelady from Georgia coming down and joining us in this conversation, and I did not realize that the gentlelady had the pleasure of meeting with and getting to know the Vargas family, or at least maybe the aunt and uncle, I think is what you said. And what I would tell you is that it is a truly wonderful family. They embody all that is right and good about the American dream, about opportunity. These are American citizens who happen to have, Hispanic family members, and which so ironic because, those of us who really try to take and honor the idea of judging people by the content of their character and not their skin color or race or creed, I find it ironic that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle seem to only view the purpose of the legislative body to view human beings by the color of their skin, and to make all of our policies based on segmenting us out. To quote the Supreme Court and John Roberts in a seminal Supreme Court case, that divvying us up by race is a sordid business. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle often use words like voter suppression when we talk about believing we should have voter identification, believing we should have rules in place about how we run our election systems, heaven forbid. And would the gentlelady agree that too often those words, like voter suppression, are code words, buzzwords, for the allegation that those of us who believe a secure border is better for immigrants and American citizens, believe that voter ID and systems that make sure American citizens are the ones voting, that we are labeled bigots, and that words like voter suppression are code word and buzzwords, dog whistles, that we are bigots, and that the agenda of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is often directed in that to label us such. Would the gentlelady agree with that?
I definitely agree with the good gentleman from Texas. You see, it's unfortunate that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle use race as a tool to push their agenda. We're here in this country, every single one of us are equal. God created us equal, and thank God we have a Constitution that affirms it. And if we are to do anything, we should look as Americans as one, because we're the citizens of this nation, and all of our policies and laws should serve our American people, not divided up by identity or politics or any other category. And it's shameful that we've come to a place after we had come so far and achieved so much. And so, yes, I do agree with you, and it needs to be done away with.
A brief moment, a sidestep away from the issue of border security, and I know the gentleman is here and is waiting, he's patient, and I would just ask one more question. The gentlelady was here on Monday, this past Monday, when we let known our desire to not allow 13 bills, 10 Democrat bills, 3 Republican bills, to move off of the House floor by voice vote. That is, without a roll call vote. And you would have thought that we, lit a match on the floor of the House of Representatives or had done something extraordinary to just break this hallowed institution from its smooth operations of today. You would think that we were, upending our Constitution as we know it, because we, believe it or not, we demanded the yeas and nays, a roll call vote on 13 bills. And the gentlelady is often taken to using motions to adjourn. And I believe I've heard she's done so, and the gentlelady has stipulated she's done so to force another hour of consideration when we have a bill like the $1.9 trillion monstrosity that reshapes the American economy, reshapes the American healthcare system, funds money for people in prison, upends our entire fiscal stability. I could go on and on. Is the gentlelady in agreement with me that what we're trying to do is to simply notice our colleagues that perhaps the People's House should debate, vote, amend, be present, not vote by proxy from your home districts. Right. Actually be here, not have fences with razor wire, actually do our job, actually represent the people that elect us to come here. Would the gentlelady agree with that?
I absolutely agree with the good gentleman. This is a place where we're sent to do a job for the people of our district. We should be able to vote on record and not have to hide behind a voice vote. We should be able to call for a motion to adjourn to give everyone pause and thought before they vote for such crucial, critical, radical, transforming legislation. I absolutely, fully agree with the good gentleman from Texas. Congress is a place where people should be working just as our regular American citizens are working 12-hour shifts, working in factories, working on job sites, paving roads, working in restaurants, serving us when we go to eat. This is absolutely a place where we should work, where we should be able to use tools to represent our districts. and not have rules changed here in the people's house to stop us from being able to use good measures for everyone in Congress to vote, be on record, and do their job that they've been elected to do. Thank you.
I think the gentlelady from Georgia, I know we've got our friend from Montana who's been waiting patiently, and so I will yield to that gentleman in just 1 minute. I would just note that the gentlelady from Georgia mentioned video taken in Southeast Texas this morning, and I'm looking at that on social media at the moment. A huge line of people waiting for smugglers to ferry them across the Rio Grande into the United States. Video courtesy of Tripwires and Triggers. That's run by a fellow named Jason Jones, who is a good friend of mine, formerly with the Department of Public Safety in Texas. Jason is on the job, on the spot, much like my friend Brandon Darby and others down who work for Bright Park, Texas, who are on the spot, always trying to look out for the interests of Texans and American citizens, but also the immigrants who seek to come here. These immigrants are being abused by cartels while my Democrat colleagues use them as political props. And it is unconscionable that we are allowing that to continue in the greatest nation in the history of the world, all again for crass political purposes. I would yield to the gentleman from Montana.
Thank you very much, the gentleman from Texas, and thank you, Madam Speaker. I just would like to add to that, what is lost in this body many, many times over is the inhumane treatment that these many travelers are experiencing, not only before they get to the United States, but then after. This is not the land of milk and honey for everyone, folks. There are people that are pressed into indentured servitude once they actually arrive here. I had the privilege of going down to the Arizona-Mexico border about a month ago with the gentleman from Texas and was able to see firsthand and meet with customs agents and Border Patrol and local law enforcement and the farmers and the ranchers. And what falls on deaf ears is the terrible treatment. They think, our friends from across the aisle, that they're being compassionate by opening up the border and declaring amnesty for everyone. And what they don't understand is that those folks are so poorly treated by the cartels as they do travel north. You can break it into 3 sections. As they travel north, these women are raped, these children are violently assaulted, they are forced and coerced into carrying drugs across the line, and then they're forced to pay $5,000 to $7,000 to try and pay for that passage. And then once they get to the border, they are then forced to carry drugs across the border. And once they get north and they're actually in our country, what happens is many times over, they're forced to pay 25–30% of their weekly income back to a cartel, which then continues to fuel other illicit crimes.
Would the gentleman, reclaiming my time for just one moment, would the gentleman be surprised if I recounted to him the story of when I was at the border last year at Laredo, and we were having a conversation with Border Patrol, and went into one of the facilities, and then we're talking to one of the fellows there, and while we were there, through conversations with one of the young men who had come across, frankly encouraged to do so and come in and meet with Border Patrol in order to try to get across. And he then gave up the location of a stash house in Houston, Texas, where we then went and found that day 50 immigrants in a basement in a house, in a stash house in Houston, Texas, being held essentially for ransom. That these are human beings, the product of a broken system that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle hail as somehow pro-immigrant, when it is decidedly the opposite of pro-immigrant. Would the gentleman agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. And my good friend from Texas, I think with your fabulous legal mind, you can tell me, as we have this 180 cities across the nation, 11 states that have declared themselves sanctuary places that these folks can go to, could we say that they are complicit in these crimes when they're incentivizing these people to travel north and get trapped into these situations?
It certainly goes without saying, and I started my remarks earlier about the knowledge and the engagement of this president and the president's administration, that their policies of this administration, the policies of Democrat cities, the policies of Democrat states with sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, and now effectively a sanctuary nation, is directly causing the movement and the migration of human beings to come here, being exploited by cartels for profit, endangering their lives, endangering American citizens, and yes, for any understanding of law, you're complicit in what is happening to the people in question.
Thank you very much. And then the last point that I would make, as my good friend from Virginia who was here earlier made, and that is it impacts every community across our nation. Right. We all are border cities now. And the state of Montana, very proud host to 7 sovereign nations, the reservations, and what happens is they become the target areas for the most widely distribution of methamphetamine and other illicit drugs and sex trafficking, and then those problems begin to spill out into the other communities around there, so the entire state ends up becoming a big, big problem.
Well, and I would say to my friend that the scourge of human trafficking and all of its elements, and human trafficking in the sense of the sex trafficking trade, human modern-day slavery, right here in the United States, people being under the thumb of dangerous organizations and cartels and illegal organizations embedded in this country, all has its roots and its connections in many ways to the trafficking of human beings across our border for profit, then the power being put over these people, in which they're working in subpar conditions or put into the sex trade, that is happening in the greatest country in the history of the world, and it's all a direct consequence of accepting and embracing that lawlessness, and lawlessness that starts at our border and is also tied to our lack of enforcement and interior enforcement through ICE and the other cutbacks by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
It has. It has. And the gentleman from Texas, I think you would agree that we are in a sad state when the humans across this nation have devolved into where they now have become collateral. The family and friends and relatives of the people that have crossed the border illegally, their family, their friends have devolved into the place that they are collateral. They are collateral to make sure that the payments are made for the people that have actually crossed the border to the north. And with that, I will yield back to the gentleman from Texas.
Thank the gentleman. I'd ask the speaker how much time I have remaining.
The gentleman from Texas has 15 minutes remaining.
Thank the speaker. I see my friend from Texas. I assume that my friend from Texas would like to join in conversation if I were to yield, or no, he's just here to. We have 15 minutes left. If the gentleman from Texas would like a couple of minutes, I'm certainly happy to yield to my friend from Texas. Okay. Well, what I would like to expand upon is a extension of what my friend from Montana was just talking about. What's happening to human beings here in the United States. But now let's talk a little bit about the impact with respect to COVID and the pandemic that we're dealing with. The Biden administration, in its infinite wisdom, directly causing what we're seeing at the border, relaxed Title 42 to allow illegal alien minors to enter the country, leading to a massive surge of illegal immigrants at the border in total. In February, CBP encountered nearly 9,500 unaccompanied alien children at the southern border. That is a 28% increase over January, more than 2,000 over last year. An incredible almost 30,000 UACs have been encountered in just the first 5 months of the fiscal year. 30,000 children. That is nearly 1,000 more UACs than the first 5 months of last year, but it's a 74% increase over fiscal year 2020 numbers. But here's the thing. It's harming these kids, but it is also distracting Border Patrol from their job. They're turning Border Patrol into an entity that has to manage people, kids, in facilities. But they're no longer doing their job between the ports of entry. So you know what that means? Fentanyl, narcotics. Why do we have a massive opioid crisis in this country? Now we're feeding into that as a literal, direct, and obvious result of the policies of this administration. And it's got to be, as I said, as I opened, either complete incompetence or purposeful, and either one of those is unacceptable. Mexico is closing their migrant protection protocol shelters where migrants are supposed to be tested and confirmed negative for COVID before being let into the United States. You lift that last one up. Reports have indicated at least 108 COVID-positive illegal aliens were released by CBP in one fell swoop. According to reports, at least 185 immigrants released in the past month in Brownsville tested positive. 25 Border Patrol agents have died of COVID. But the administration has taken no major steps to prioritize those frontline workers for the vaccine in the last 2 months. Most of them are having to go into the communities to go get the vaccine, even though they're on the front lines dealing with COVID-positive individuals coming across our border. It is for this reason that my colleague from New Mexico, Yvette Harrell, introduced H.R. 471, the Protecting Americans from Unnecessary Spread Upon Entry from COVID Act of 2021, or the PAUSE Act. Title 42 must remain in effect under her act until all state and federal lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, curfews, and other COVID mandates end, all public and federal public health emergencies for COVID-19 end, and the CDC's COVID-19 traveler health risk level for Canada and Mexico is reduced to level 1. That is a good bill. We should continue to enforce Title 42. There are 44 co-sponsors of this bill, only Republicans. Yesterday, I filed H.Res. 216, which is a rule to discharge this bill. And when it ripens, which is another 8 or so legislative days, we're going to be pushing to discharge that bill from committee and vote on it on the floor of the House of Representatives. And I hope my Democrat colleagues will agree that we should enforce Title 42 to protect American citizens and make sure that we don't have an epidemic at our southern border. This is what we're facing, and it is a direct consequence of an administration peddling amnesty and the false hope to immigrants to come here through dangerous channels being abused by cartels in the process. And I'd be happy to yield for my friend from Texas.
And I thank my friend from Texas. I'm so thrilled you're hammering this point. These are people's lives, as you were saying earlier. We just were having a hearing in a crime subcommittee, and an article was introduced that said there's more drugs that come in through public ports than there is illegally across our border. Well, my friend has been involved in enforcing the law as a state prosecutor. There is no one that can tell you how much in the way of drugs we're missing. But these kids are now there's incentive from the Biden administration to keep you reusing these kids. And Border Patrolmen are saying, you may have touched on this earlier, my friend may have touched on it, that actually they're recognizing some of the kids that come in and help people get to stay there, and then they'll go back across the border and come with another group. It's bad enough that this administration is luring people up, and especially children, to their detriment. But it's even worse when they become just products to be used and thrown away. And when I've been standing there all hours of the night, seeing the long line of people being in processed, and Border Patrolmen are asking their questions, and at the opposite end where I would go, there are people passing kids around. Who's going to be the mother? Who's going to be the father? Do you want this kid? I'll take the kid. You can see them. Who's going to take the kid? It clearly didn't, the child didn't belong to any of the people there. And multiple times I've seen them looking at the address that the drug cartel gave them, and they're supposed to turn that over to Border Patrol, and then ICE ship them, or HHS ship them where the drug cartels want them to go, and they're switching addresses. I'd rather go to that one. And then they tell the Border Patrol, this is where I have a relative, this is where I want to go. And Border Patrol said that's why the drug cartels call them, us here in the U.S., their logistics. They get them illegally across the border, and then taxpayers ship them wherever the cartels want them. I yield back to my friend.
Well, I thank my friend from Texas. I think the gentleman who has spent time at the border, as I have, would appreciate the story that I can recount that when I was, I think, last there, there was a conversation involving a young man who had come across, and he was being questioned, like you just described, and through the questioning about where he came from and all the things you go through as age and so forth. And then at one point, the young man said he needed to use the bathroom. And the Border Patrol agent said, "Oh, sure, that's no problem." He said, "Let me get up and show you where it is." He says, "Oh, I know." He knew. He knew where the bathroom was. It wasn't his first rodeo. This is happening every day at our border. Literally every day. But the media just goes about its business, ignoring the crisis now that it's not politically expedient to do so. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle who spent 2 years, the last 3 years, saying this is all manufactured crisis, right? There is no crisis at the border. Then trumpeting the crisis suddenly, right? There was no crisis. Then there was a crisis. Then there was people drinking out of toilets, a lie. Then there was about kids in cages, a lie. The fences and the barriers put up in facilities to protect these kids and separate them from the dangerous elements to make sure someone claiming that they're this kid's uncle is actually the kid's uncle. Those chain link barriers put up in these big facilities were put up by whom, my friend from Texas?
That would be the Obama administration, although now we have some being put up by the Biden administration.
And that is exactly correct. And yet, for 4 years under the Trump administration, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle went around ranting about the treatment of migrants that we're dealing with because of very broken policies, trying to protect the kids, keep them from being abused, put them in air-conditioned facilities so there's airflow, the chain link barriers so you can see them. Oh no, kids in cages. Oh, drinking out of a toilet. It was a lie. It was straight up a lie. I sent my chief of staff down the next day, went and looked at what they were talking about, and it was one of those devices that is a toilet with then a water fountain off the back of it, which we have in all of our facilities and a lot of our prisons, facilities, ICE facilities and stuff in this country. By the way, every bathroom in America, the water supply behind your drywall is supplying the water to your faucet and the water to your toilet. Oh, but this is kids drinking out of toilets. Never let a crisis go to waste, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We're seeing that right now with $1.9 trillion. We're seeing that right now. And we're seeing the result of that right now with the Biden border crisis directly of the making of this administration. The direct consequence of undoing and refusing to enforce the laws, undoing the Migrant Protection Protocol, working with Mexico, refusing to fully enforce Title 42, refusing to go through what you're supposed to do on asylum determinations, refusing to limit catch and release, and instead turning the Department of Homeland Security into a catch and release organization, trumpeting an amnesty bill, and then attracting families to come through dangerous channels, risking their own children and lives at the hands of cartels, all to profit, enrich cartels, and then have the audacity to say that is compassionate. The audacity to say that that is pro-immigrant. Meanwhile, the people I represent, the Texans we represent, we're having to foot the bill. We're having to deal with it. We're having to deal with schools. We're having to deal with high-speed chases. We're having to deal with crime, drug trafficking, the reach of cartels into South Texas. And no one in this people's house gives a whit because of political expediency. I'd ask the Speaker how much time I have remaining.
The gentleman from Texas has 2 minutes remaining.
So, gentlemen, does my friend from Texas have anything else he would like to add?
Reinforce, when these people get into the United States, their nightmare is not over. They get shipped to towns all over America, and those that are wearing colored armbands now tell the drug cartel what their situation is. When they get where they're going, they're still under the thumb of the drug cartels to either sell drugs or sex trafficking, and if they don't pay up what they owe, then a family member gets killed or some part cut off. We know how bad the drug cartels are. So it didn't just end there when they got to America. That nightmare will continue, and this administration is all part of that.
Well, I thank the gentleman. I'll close my last minute, and I would just say that it is currently easier for the cartels to exploit our southern border and to allow gang members and dangerous narcotics to come into this country than it is for the American people to get access to the people's house. Fences with razor wire surround this building. We are apparently so afraid of what might happen to us in this body that we need fence with razor wire, but meanwhile our southern border is wide open for exploitation. And I would only just remind, as I started, that guy who runs that outfit over there in the White House, that guy either is blatantly ignoring his duty to defend the border of the United States purposely, or he has no idea what's going on, because no American president should or would allow this kind of activity to be happening at our southern border, endangering American citizens, endangering immigrants in the name of the United States. With that, I yield back, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green,